We have a great interest in creating an axis of our own. The words of Benjamin Netanyahu as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi makes his second visit to Israel. In an increasingly volatile region, what's driving what Israel describes as its special relationship with India? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. It's a visit expected to reinforce the already strong ties between Israel and India, but it also highlights the shift in Indian policy on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict since Narendra Modi came to power in 2014. Over the years, the two countries have developed partnerships in many fields, particularly defence and technology. Now they say they want to take that relationship a step further, with Netanyahu hoping to establish a new axis. But what does it mean for the Middle East, and what role would India play? We'll talk to our panel of guests in a moment, but first this report from Imogen Kimber.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Israel for his second state visit. The two countries are trade partners, with goods worth nearly $4 billion exchanged in 2025. A significant portion of that is weapons. India is the biggest buyer of Israeli military equipment. Recently, the two signed an $8.6 billion deal that included ballistic and air-to-surface missiles. And the countries cooperate on advanced technology, including artificial intelligence, cybersecurity and surveillance systems. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he and Modi are friends.
We will see an expression of the special relations that have developed in recent years between Israel and India, and between myself and Prime Minister Modi. We're personal friends, we speak frequently on the phone, we visit each other.
However, India was once a supporter of Palestine. Both were victims of British colonialism. In 1947, India voted against the UN's partition plan of Palestine, and later against Israel's membership of the United Nations. It wasn't until 1950 that India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru recognised Israel but did not establish diplomatic relations. However, when war broke out between India and China in 1962, Israel began supplying India with weapons. Publicly, though, India still supported Palestine, specifically the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And it was the first non-Arab nation to recognise the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and one of the first to recognise Palestinian statehood. It was in the 1990s, when India was opening up its economy, that formal diplomatic ties were established, and Israel supported India in its conflict with Pakistan. But the real change in relations came when Modi came to office in 2014. He was the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel in 2017. Under Modi, trade and security cooperation increased. On Israel's genocide in Gaza, India condemned the humanitarian crisis at the United Nations, but abstained from resolutions calling for a ceasefire. For its part, Israel has employed thousands of Indians since October 7, 2023, as it cancelled work permits for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. With such strong ties, it's expected that Modi's visit will only reinforce this partnership. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
So plenty to discuss today on Inside Story. Let's bring in our guests who are joining us. From Tel Aviv, Alon Liel, a former director of Israel's foreign ministry and an international relations commentator. In London, Andreas Krieg, an associate professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College London. And in New Delhi, Siddharth Vardarajan, the founding editor of The Wire, an Indian digital news portal. Let me start with you, Siddharth, there in New Delhi. How is this being viewed? How big a deal is this trip?
Well, it depends who you speak to. I think from the government's point of view and from the point of view of those who support the government's policies, this trip is yet another milestone in India's attempts to fully embrace Israel, to work with Israel. There's a great deal of enthusiasm about the possibility of India acquiring new defense technology from Israel. And in general, I think that this is seen as yet another, in the eyes of these people, yet another sort of important visit that Narendra Modi has made abroad. in the eyes of critics of the Modi government, this visit is seen at best as something which is being driven by Netanyahu's calendar, not so much by India's, and has the possibility of placing India in a very awkward position should things in West Asia get, take a turn for the worse. There's talk of an imminent American attack on Iran. And of course, you also have the ongoing crisis in the West Bank and Gaza, despite the ceasefire, the killing of Palestinians there. And this visit coming at the end of a year and a half, 2 years of terrible carnage in which over 70,000 Palestinians were killed. There is an ICC, International Criminal Court, warrant out for Netanyahu. So this is not quite the best optics for an Indian prime minister to be seen embracing somebody like Netanyahu. That would be the point of view of those who are critical of the government.
So, Alon, Siddharth just mentioned the big issue of a possible conflict with Iran. Given that, how big a deal, how is this being viewed where you are in Tel Aviv?
It's a big deal in Israel. No controversy, in fact. A huge achievement for Netanyahu. Israel had 2 very, very difficult years in the international arena. Netanyahu himself can hardly travel abroad. And here the Prime Minister of India is coming with enthusiasm, with the warmth. We saw the hug at the airport, and definitely big day for Netanyahu. No criticism here because India is important. The visit has a security element, an economic element. So in fact, no opposition here to the visit. In the Knesset, the opposition will not sit on its seats because the chairman did not invite us, the head of our Supreme Court. But this is an internal Israeli issue. I don't think it will affect the whole visit. So here, Netanyahu supporters are celebrating.
Andreas, there are some similarities between these two men in very different contexts. 2 very long-serving leaders, Modi, the second longest-serving Indian Prime Minister, Netanyahu, the longest-serving Israeli Prime Minister, both of them deeply controversial. And you could argue potentially that they are ideological bedfellows. Modi accused of favouring his Hindu majority, and Netanyahu accused by most human rights groups for years of pursuing a policy of apartheid.
Yeah, a lot of what is happening today is really a personal relationship on the forefront between Modi and Netanyahu that has been really becoming more intense in recent years. And that has kind of driven the bilateral relations between India and Israel. And both of them are populist leaders. Both of them are on the far right of their politics. Both of them share an ideological alignment when it comes to the securitization of Islam and Islamism. Both of them have been accused of Islamophobia. Certainly the Hindutva movement, which kind of is kind of the underbelly of the ruling party in India, has very strong anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic sort of tendencies. And so there is a shared concern over Islam and Islamism between the two. Both of them obviously reject Hamas. And in that context, there is an ideological element to that relationship. But I think we shouldn't overstate it because in the end of the day, India is an extremely pragmatic country. It's a country that doesn't reject sort of the assertiveness that Israel brings to the table. It's a country that is more reactive. It's a country that also doesn't want to choose sides. It's a country that doesn't want to be pushed into certain alignments or into a zero-sum game. And that's the sort of game that Netanyahu is in. Netanyahu is a man cornered who is fighting for political survival, international survival, and a man who is extremely zero-sum, extremely assertive in the way that he's been pushing politics. And that doesn't necessarily go together with Modi's vision for India as a great power in Asia or South Asia and West Asia. And I think that's where I think this ideological alignment that the two men have is kind of limited.
Siddharth, let me ask you to bring in a little bit of history, only a little potted history here because we don't have a lot of time. But these were two nations which both had violent births, born within a year of each other. but India's relations were not particularly warm with Israel at the beginning, were they?
No, India's leaders, in fact, prior to India becoming independent itself, had always taken the view that the aspiration of Jewish people to a state of their own would be a valid thing to pursue only if it was done in consultation with and with the approval of the Palestinian residents of what was then Palestine. And when Israel was formed, and then you had the first round of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, Indians, like many others around the world, were quite appalled, and it took many, many decades. In fact, not until the 1990s that Indian leaders came around, the government of India came around to extending sort of formal diplomatic recognition. Even then, I would say relations were more focused on certain economic matters than defense matters. The warmth that you see today between Modi and Netanyahu at the political, at the strategic level is something that's really very, very recent. It really goes back to Modi. When Vajpayee, the earlier right-wing prime minister that India had, you had a sort of visit by an Israeli prime minister to India, but no Indian PM had visited Israel until Mr. Modi went, and this is now his second visit. So there is a sense in which this relationship, as your other panelists said, is being driven by these two gentlemen. They share many things. They have many things in common, not least, I would say, an authoritarian impulse when it comes to domestic politics, looking to suborn domestic institutions, which is partly why I suppose you have a standoff over the Knesset matter in Israel. But essentially, these two leaders are embracing each other. I think Israel probably has a greater expectation from India than India is going to be able to deliver. Netanyahu wants India to be all in as far as Israel's ambitions in the region are concerned. And India is not going to want to get embroiled in conflicts with Iran, for example. Now there's there's this talk of a hexagon of alliances. India is quite happy to embrace economic ties and work with Israel, with for example, the U.S. proposed IMED corridor. But when you move that talk towards the direction of military strategic alliances, that's something which is going to leave India a little bit wary.
Okay, Alon, India was the first non-Arab state to recognise Palestine back in 1988. And looking at the history, it is interesting that India effectively got permission from Yasser Arafat before it introduced full diplomatic relations with Israel in 1993. He was asked about it at a press conference when he was visiting New Delhi. And then 10 days after that, Israel decided to establish diplomatic ties. Why I think that's interesting now is that was in the glow of the Oslo peace accords. And of course, those are accords that Israel is now completely tearing up.
So in the past, India was much closer to the Palestinians than to Israel. The Muslim minority inside India was a player, was very effective. It has changed since Modi came to power with a personal friendship and the very similar ideology of the two leaders. And for the Israeli people to see a visit of a prime minister of a very important country with a positive momentum in its economy, not affected at all, at least so far, by the Gaza war or the West Bank event, is a kind of a glimpse of hope. I mean, our relations with the whole world, maybe except the United States of Trump, were badly affected, largely affected by the events of the last 2 years, especially Gaza, but recently also West Bank. And here comes the prime minister and is paying a normal official visit with the whole protocol, with economics, with security, and even very strong political regional dimensions. So for the Israelis, it's kind of fresh air after being almost isolated in the last 2 years. I guess that for the Palestinians, it's a big blow, and maybe for other Middle Eastern countries also, especially probably Turkey, since we lost Turkey, especially in the last 2 years, but even before, we built alliances with regional countries that were rivals of Turkey, especially Greece and Cyprus. And this visit of Modi is seen also in the context, in the regional and even global context of Turkey and Pakistan acting together, and we are kind of building the alliance of India and Israel as an alternative. So here it's really, I think, a surprise to the Israeli public. We knew the relations are good, but we didn't know that there'll be such a high-profile, positive state visit.
So, Andreas, if you could expand on that, what Israel wants out of this. As you've heard from Alon, people in Israel fear that they were becoming a pariah nation, and certainly European public opinion has turned against them. What other tangible things do you think Israel wants? Clearly, there's a trade and technology element of this, and I'm not just talking normal tech, I'm talking the nasty tech. I'm talking the military stuff, the drones, the surveillance capabilities and the like.
Well, that's what's in it for India. I mean, India does want access to that technology. They have already a very, very good relationship with Israel's high-tech sector across, cyber security, cyber technology, drone technology, especially in the defense and security realm. And there is obviously a logistics element to it. I mean, India wants to, is becoming a player in global logistics, and trade corridors are important for India as well. But that's all very much in the economic/defense realm for the Indians. I think for Israel, there's a lot more in it. I mean, Israel is very isolated under Netanyahu. That Netanyahu government, with the exception of the United States, has no friends in the world, certainly not in the developing world. And here is one of the leading countries of the developing world, India, wholeheartedly embracing Netanyahu. That certainly is great imagery for Netanyahu, who was also facing elections likely this year. And so he's trying to counter that narrative of saying Israel is not isolated. I'm a statesman. I'm able to provide a new alliance. Although, it's not an alliance. It's a partnership. It's one that has, it's based on interdependence. There are mutual benefits for both sides. But I do think Israel is benefiting more from this than India is. And India, as I said, is not trying to push, doesn't want to be pushed into that sort of alliance thinking, this zero-sum thinking that they have to be with Israel as opposed to the Arab states. And this talk of Netanyahu saying there's this new Sunni alliance of of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey emerging against Israel. And he's trying to obviously pull India out of it and saying India is on our side in this. Indians would very much wholeheartedly reject that. And India is also quite clear to say that they have a relationship with Saudi Arabia that is very intimate and very important. The relationship with the Gulf states in general, also with Qatar, very deep, very important. So it's for the Indians, this is not a zero-sum game. They're not siding with Israel against the Sunni Arab world. Quite the contrary. I think from an economic point of view, the Gulf is far more important for India, also in terms of historic traditional relationships. So, and obviously we have that relationship with Iran. So it's not an embrace of Netanyahu's policy. It's also not an embrace of Netanyahu's war in Gaza and his war in the West Bank. And actually, if you look at the last couple of years, what India has set since 2023 official statements on Israeli behavior, they've been quite outspoken to reject the annexation of the West Bank. They're still very firmly on the page of two-state solution. And they've also certainly called out Israeli attacks and war crimes in Gaza on hospitals and civilian death and so on and so forth. Certainly India could have been starker, could have been stronger in the message that they send on Gaza, but they were quite clear that they're not siding with Israel on this. And Modi has to be very careful not to be seen as embracing Netanyahu's policies here.
Siddharth, I'd like to see how all this is viewed in India in terms of what happened in Gaza with you in a moment. But on that tech issue and defence links, I think it's worth bringing up the fact that that there is a long-standing under Modi relationship between India and Israel has been providing all sorts of technology, including surveillance technology. And you're one of our analysts today, but you're also one of the victims of this. The Pegasus software, developed by a country called NSO, certain key mobile phone numbers in India were targeted with that, and you were one of them. Tell us about that.
Well, I was one of them, and the irony is that I am part of a news organization, The Wire, which actively worked on the expose of NSO and NSO's customer list and these numbers. Thousands of numbers around the world that were potential targets of Pegasus, including around 2,000 numbers in India. And of course, as we went through this list, we found, well, one of the numbers was mine, a couple of other colleagues, lots of journalists, lots of opposition politicians, human rights defenders. And, this is something that obviously Modi purchased and acquired from Israel, I think, during his 2017 visit, because the use of Pegasus became noticeable from end of 2017, 2018 onwards, and was used essentially to target people who were critical of Modi. So this is one facet of India-Israel cooperation, which I assume is carrying on. India has never acknowledged this, nor has Israel. But obviously this is going on, and Pegasus is one kind of spyware. There are tons of others that I'm sure India is going to continue to want to pursue from Israel, and Israel will happily sell to India. There are other surveillance or security or defense-related things that India wants to buy. India is very interested in Israeli drone technology, air defense, missile defense. There is some talk of India wanting to buy, Iron Dome, Iron Beam systems from Israel. All of this remains to be seen. But I want to come back on Gaza, if you allow me, because the Indian position on Gaza and on Israel's genocide in Gaza was, I would say, not critical, actually. I mean, India signed on to some resolutions at the UNGA, at the Human Rights Commission, but never with a great deal of enthusiasm. India has never criticized Israel by name for any attacks on Gaza civilians, even when an Indian national who was part of the United Nations was killed in what many believe was a targeted attack on a UN vehicle. The government of India never criticized Israel for that. So Mr. Modi has been very, very reticent, and the Indian Foreign Ministry has not been vocal at all about Israel's genocide. Even the latest statement that the Palestinian mission drafted to criticize Israeli aggressive activity and land grab on the West Bank is a statement that India signed on to 24 hours after a whole bunch of other countries had. And I believe did so only because there was some negative reaction within India at India's failure to do that. So I think the government of India, it, of course, formally supports a two-state solution and has not abandoned the Palestinians in a formal sense, but effectively by supporting Israel, by selling arms to Israel during the ongoing, when the genocide was going on, India sold weapons, drone parts, other munitions to Israel. One of the few countries to have sold munitions to Israel during that time. India has done all of that and has effectively, I would say, on the ground abandoned the Palestinians. And to pay a visit at this time, when Netanyahu and Israel stand isolated, and in my view, rightly so, is something which is, again, a very, very negative thing for the people of Palestine, who want more than anything else a chance to live with dignity, live within their own homeland. And this is something that India has really moved away from.
Alon,
one other point I would say.
Can I bring in Alon on one of the things that Andreas said a moment ago, which was the idea of Netanyahu, which he raised recently, that India could join a new bloc. The hexagon axis, it was mentioned. I mean, do you think this is in any way realistic?
First, I think the bilateral aspect, the economic and security aspect, is more important than the regional. The fact that we became the number 6 country in the world in arms exports and built huge military and homeland security industries forces us to sell massively abroad. We sold to India before in the scope of maybe $1.5 billion or $2 billion. But if I'm not wrong, Azerbaijan passed the India in the last few years. And I think this visit will again place India as the number one buyer of arms and military security technology of Israel, which is critical to our military and aviation industries. Some of them are governmental. It is also critical to our economy because the scope of arms export became a very important scope of our overall economic and technological picture. Now, to come to the regional, it is a boost to Netanyahu's morale, but we have to remember that India was never a player physically in any way in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or in other conflicts Israel were involved. The level of interest
if I could bring in Andreas, I mean, this you've mentioned and Alon's mentioned this idea of a new axis. I mean, you just look at the main global issue at the moment, which is a possible conflict with Iran. I mean, these countries may have issues and trade links that are very good, but they certainly don't agree on everything, do they?
No, absolutely not. And on Iran, India has tried to play zigzags. I mean, they've only when they come really under pressure by the United States do they actually divest away from Iran, particularly when it comes to energy imports from Iran, where Iran still plays an important role and has played an important role for India for quite a considerable time. And then there is the issue of trade and logistics, where Indian companies are still investing and are invested in Iran. And India also is not a country that is advocating for regional escalation. The fallout of this war with Iran, between Israel and Iran, or the US and Iran, will have ramifications for supply chains that will directly affect India. It will have ramifications for Afghanistan and Central Asia, and thereby also have direct ripple effects for the Indian economy. So India has no interest in this major escalation. India is supporting a diplomatic solution to this. It looks at Oman, for example, as a major gateway for stability into the Gulf. And here also India relies on Omani mediation and is very much advocating for that.
Andreas, thank you very much, and thank you to our guests today, Alon Liel, Andreas Krieg and Siddharth Vardarajan. If you came in late or missed any part of the programme, you can watch it again at any time on our website, aljazeera.com. We'd love to hear your views. Post them on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or find us on X, where we are at AJ Inside Story. I'll be back here very soon. Until then, from me, James Bays, and all the team, stay safe and well. Bye-bye for now.